Certainly. Welcome to the 73rd MOS Annual Convention. My name is Meg Harris, this year's convention chairperson. This is a special convention. It marks the first virtual convention in MOS history. Our format has adjusted due to the virtual nature of this year's convention, but we think we have found a path that meets the spirit of past conventions and still keeps all attendees safe. This year, we have adopted a theme, unlike previous conventions, the breeding bird of Maryland. MOS is in the second of the 5-year effort to document the breeding birds in Maryland and the DC area. We hope you are participating in this year's individual birding competitions that center around finding breeding birds and are inspired to join the MOS atlasing efforts. You will soon receive your convention pin. Mailing procedures are being worked out. This year we had special rules. Because of the weekends, birding is spread out across the entire state of Maryland. The birds depicted in the pin had to be from the list of birds which breed in every county across the state. The winning design is a northern cardinal created by Rob Townley Tomaso of Caroline County. Today we had interesting Q&A sessions with 3 of our seminar speakers, each bringing a different perspective to birding. Tomorrow there'll be 2 more seminar Q&A sessions, the poster sessions, and a chat room for the wine and cheese social. Sorry, this year's folks, you got to bring your own. We will again have chat rooms for both Saturday and Sunday for the dinner and lunch and dinner breaks, so everyone can share their days and birding experiences. And I think the weather's going to be a little better tomorrow. Access to those chat rooms called meetups in the convention platform can be found in the agenda on the Whova platform. And Sunday night, we'll have a session to close out the convention agenda, and we'll do our tally rally and the birding competition results, as well as the photo competition and the silent auction winners. We have a number of things up for silent auction, donated by both sponsors and MOS members. You can bid on these items by going to the MOS Convention silent auction webpage, which is mosconvention.org, or raffle-2, or go through the convention platform by selecting community from the menu on the left, and then scroll down and select silent auction under the all topics tab. MOS thanks our generous sponsors, KT, where you can get birdseed and feeders, as well as Vortex and Maven Opticals, the Mill of Bel Air, REI, Green Photography, Tractor Supply, and Celestron Optics. Please take a moment to visit their websites, and they're accessible through the convention platform by selecting the sponsors menu on the left navigation area. Now I'd like to introduce our MOS president, John McKittrick, who has a few remarks. John?
Thank you, Meg. I'd like to thank everyone who is here joining us for our 73rd convention and our first virtual convention. I hope that you had a chance to go birding today in spite of the rain and have shared your birding checklists with the convention so that we can have an honest to goodness tally rally on Sunday. Your eBird checklist should be shared with MOS Convention 2021, all one word. Doing that will allow us to collect and process all the submissions in time for the tally rally on Sunday. And oh yes, for entry into the birding competitions too. It's been a tumultuous 12 months in our nation, to say the least. Well, we as birders would have liked nothing better than to go off into the fields, the woods, or the marshes to escape from the tumult. The events of the past 12 months have caused considerable upheaval in the birding world. The Central Park incidents, George Floyd's death, and the Black Lives Matter movement have caused birding organizations, including MOS, to take a close look at their own operations and to commit themselves to equity, diversity, and inclusion. These events have led to the very names of our birds being brought into question. Why should bird names celebrate people, much less such terribly flawed people as Bachman, Townsend, or even John James Audubon? And of course, the biggest upheaval of our lives in this past year has been the pandemic. Because of COVID, we've not been able to have our usual in-person chapter meetings. We were forced to cancel last year's convention, and we had to cancel field trips during the best times of the year, last spring and last fall. And yet the Maryland Ornithological Society and its members have embraced the changes that have been forced upon us. And in some ways, MOS has surprisingly prospered. The move to online meetings went well. Apparently, birders can do computers. Who knew? And the online meetings resulted in local chapter meetings that were attended virtually by people from across the state and even across the country. Some chapter meetings had people from as many as 8 other chapters, a knitting together of the MOS community that has typically only happened once a year at the convention. We are already looking into how to use these newly developed capabilities for sharing when we reopen more fully this fall, and so that we can continue to bring together the MOS community, even as spread across the state as we are. Next year's convention, planned for Cumberland in mid-May, will likely be a hybrid event with keynote talks available virtually to MOS members, just like tonight's is, but with the usual field trips to the local hotspots, Finzel Swamp, Old Legislative Road, Dan's Rock, the C&O Canal, to name a few. I just can't wait. We birders have been lucky too. The very act of birding, which is the passion of our members and the lifeblood of our organization, has indeed provided us a way to escape from the tumult, if only temporarily, and forced us to stop, if only briefly, doom scrolling on our smartphones, waiting for the latest bad news to drop. COVID did not prevent us from birding, whether in our backyards, in our neighborhoods, or in our atlas blocks. The first year of the atlas itself gave us an additional impetus to go out birding, where we could simultaneously be socially distanced and bird in a deeper and more fulfilling way. Thank goodness for the birds. This convention is different from previous years, not only because it is virtual, but also because we decided not to charge registration fees to MOS members. Some of the costs of putting on this convention are being paid by the sponsors, and please support them. But we ask that you also consider supporting the work that has gone into this convention by donating to MOS. You can do that simply by visiting mdbirds.org/donate and choosing to donate to the annual convention. And don't forget to fill out the evaluation form at the end of the conference, because we want to know how we did. Before I introduce tonight's keynote speaker, a couple of words about questions in the format of this talk. This is a webinar, not a virtual meeting. Your options as attendees are more limited. In particular, your cameras and microphones are turned off. So if you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your question, and our speaker will answer the question in good time. You can view this talk in full screen mode by clicking on the word view in the upper right-hand corner of this window and then selecting full screen from the drop-down menu. We've introduced at this virtual convention a theme, the breeding birds of Maryland, in part because this convention is spread out across the entire state. It is also year 2 of our 5-year Atlas effort. We've already heard from Gabriel Foley, our enthusiastic Atlas coordinator, in a seminar this afternoon discussing strategies for more effective atlasing. But behind the scenes, there has been a huge change in how the observations for this atlas are being collected and compiled. Those of you who participated in atlases past will remember filling out pieces of paper that were collected and compiled by county coordinators. For this atlas, We are using Cornell Lab's eBird platform to collect the observations, and incidentally proving again that birders do use computers even while in the field. Several years ago, MOS was moved to remember one of its own, Chan Robbins, by naming the keynote speech at the convention after him. Chan Robbins, of course, was the father of atlasing in this country and was instrumental in getting Maryland to conduct the very first atlases, initially county-based in Montgomery and Howard counties, then statewide. It is entirely fitting tonight that for the Chandler Robbins keynote speech, our speaker is Ian Davies of Cornell Lab of Ornithology, who will be discussing atlasing and birding in the 21st century. Ian is one of the eBird project leaders at Cornell and focuses on coordinating eBird's technical developments and partnerships with groups around the world. He is one of those birders who really does computers. Ian?
Thanks so much, John, and thanks, Meg, also for the opportunity to be here, and really excited to be joining. As talking about a little bit earlier, sad to not be able to join in person. Was really looking forward to that last year, but for everybody that's here tonight, hope to be able to run into you in the field at some point, maybe out atlasing. So as John said, I'm Ian. Nice to meet you all, at least virtually, and I'm going to be talking a bit today about eBird and birding and atlasing and kind of all that, how all that fits together in the world that we all bird in today. So just a little bit about me, as John mentioned, I feel very fortunate to be able to work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as one of the eBird project leaders, where in my mind, what I try and do is connect the passion that people feel for birds with on the ground impacts locally, regionally, and around the world, and trying to do that through partnerships and collaboration. So really excited to be able to work together on the Atlas with Gabriel and the MOS and all the other terrific groups working on birds and bird conservation in Maryland and beyond, as well as with many other atlases and projects around the world. So tonight, what kind of gonna touch on a little bit is just a broad overview to start of kind of 21st century birding and atlasing, which in my mind is kind of how when we all go out every day in our yards, in our local park, wherever it might be, when you see a bird and report that, what does that do? What is that helping? What is that contributing to? And so kind of give a broad overview of birds, birding, its impact around the world these days. Look at some of the ways that your contributions kind of are having an impact in eBird writ large, our understanding of birds, our understanding of migration, and then some of the on the ground changes that has made in policy and conservation. And then flip back a little bit to look at atlasing and kind of the Maryland Atlas, Maryland DC Atlas specifically, to understand all the incredible work that you all have done, and then give a little bit of a preview of a couple upcoming eBird tools that hopefully will be exciting to some folks. And then I have a bunch of time at the end for questions. So please, if you have any questions at any time, don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A panel on Zoom. And depending on kind of how they pop up or what they look like, might tackle them midstream or wait to the end. But I really look forward to any questions about anything you talk about here, anything eBird related, anything along those lines. So we're all here because we like birds, and that is something that is an incredibly widespread and powerful thing that brings people together all around the world. And wherever you go, there's just something about birds that speaks to people. And I know we don't need to hear this or be aware of this, because that's what drives us. But it's continually amazing and inspiring to me, just the ability to go kind of anywhere in the world, any person, you see them holding binoculars or looking at, and you can kind of go up and be like, seen anything good? And you're immediately speaking the same language. It's this really incredible thing that birds just kind of bring people together across different beliefs, different languages, nationalities, whatever it might be. Birds kind of unite our world. And it's such a powerful thing to think about at a global scale. And so at eBird, what we've tried to do is kind of provide a platform for that passion for birds, for that global interest that people feel, and hopefully provide an outlet for that can give back both to all of us that like birds and also the birds themselves. So what we're looking at here is kind of a testament to the power of birds, really. This map here is not a map of the Earth at night, and there's actually no underlying outlines in this at all. All that we're looking at here is people's contributions to eBird, people's checklists and observations that they've contributed to eBird, which is now more than 1 billion individual bird sightings from every country on Earth, from almost 700,000 people around the world. And again, just a testament to the power of birds and what it can do when we all join together around it. And so with this much data, there's so much we can learn. And there's so many ways to bring people together and engage them, whether it's for an atlas in Maryland and DC, or for trying to understand birds across an entire hemisphere, a continent, or even on a specific day. One of my favorite kind of other testaments to the power of birds is the Global Big Day that some of you may have been able to join in this past May or in previous years, where it's kind of this challenge for one day around the world as a global team. What can we come together around and see what we can find? And so this specific Global Big Day this May, more than 50,000 people came together from 192 countries and reported almost 70% of the world's birds in a single day, which is incredibly inspiring to me, at least, especially in the global scenario that we're all living in right now. So the power of birds brings people together. And when you have that data, what can you do? Okay, people are going out every day, they're reporting what they see, they're reporting what they find. How can that be used for impact? One of the things that can just be a deceptively simple thing to some degree, and that visionaries like Chan Robbins and others kind of had the idea of, is just understanding both change over time and just where birds are when. And so what we're looking at right here is a visualization of 114 different species of birds. So each dot is one species, and the dot represents the center of that population on that day of the year. So it's the centroid, the average of all the reports of that species on that day, averaged out to a single location to represent where that is. And what it really is, when you look at it across this suite of species, is it's kind of the pulse of the planet. It's the migration coming alive and getting to see both something that is mesmerizing, at least to me. I've spent more time watching this than I should admit to anybody. But it's also full of meaning. There's a ton of information you can look at here. You can see in fall how there's a lot of birds that are moving, especially over the Eastern Gulf and coming down kind of through the Central Caribbean. This very specific time period in which they're kind of racing across. And in spring, when they're coming back north, obviously Central America is a huge focal point for a lot of this. And also birds are moving back a little bit more westerly. And so this was actually used in a paper to describe kind of the general loop pattern of migration writ large in the hemisphere, where birds tend to be further west in spring and further east in fall as an entire kind of group of animals. But you can also look at individual species, understand when they arrive, where they arrive, and kind of what they're doing. And all of this, all of the information that went into what we're looking at here is from eBird, from eBirders, from any of you who have ever contributed a checklist, who have ever been a part of an atlas submission. Your data are making this possible. And this is completely from birdwatcher data, and is something that is allowing us to better understand our world. And in addition to kind of across a whole suite of species, there's also the ability to understand a specific species and kind of where and when it's living its life and what it's doing. So here we're looking at tundra swan, and its full annual cycle of tundra swan. So each time the map moves, that's a different week. You can see on the right there, kind of week of the year changing. And the darker the color on the map, the higher the number of tundra swans in that region for that week. And so what this is here is kind of a way to understand a bird, not just in the context that you might see it in, wintering in one of its kind of highest abundances in the mid-Atlantic, but also understanding when it arrives, when it leaves, where it goes, when it breeds, where is most important to the species. These models here, so what we're looking at here is a predictive model that is taking all of your eBird sightings, combining it with a bunch of information on habitat and elevation and weather and a variety of different characteristics, and then predicting kind of across the landscape how many individual tundra swans you would potentially encounter in that area on that week of the year. And so what this is relative abundance. And so the abundance element here is a really valuable thing because it can be very important for conservation, both decision-making and also implementation. So if you're a conservation decision maker and you have, say, $100,000 to preserve some element of land, and you can understand not just that there are tundra swans in point A and tundra swans in point B, but that there's 100 here and 5 here, you can then have much more effective decision making about, okay, if I protect the area with 100, that's probably going to have a better impact on the species. And so this data, this is part of eBird status and trends. So all of this stuff that I'm going to show today is all available on ebird.org. It's all free. Everything is free and open access. And these data are used by researchers, scientists, students, and decision makers kind of all around the US and the world to understand birds and what they're doing and when they're doing it. And again, it's all from your data, your reports. And there's kind of two things that I always feel important to point out here. One is that this abundance element, again, the how many, not just whether or not they're there, is actually a really valuable thing. So if you're ever going out birding or eBirding and you're kind of not sure if you really want to take the time to count the birds that you see, right? You could just put an X to say they're there, or you could say there were 3 or 50 or 100. If you can take that extra bit of time, it makes the information a lot more valuable to folks who would be able to use it. And in addition, these models we're looking at here are using complete checklists. So if you've eBirded a fair amount, you've probably seen the question, are you reporting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? And what that question is asking is, are you intentionally leaving off birds that you detected, basically? It's not, did you find and identify every single bird that was where you were birding? Because that's impossible. But it's, if you saw a bald eagle and a pigeon, did you include the eagle and the pigeon, or did you just report the eagle? And so if you say you're reporting both the eagle and the pigeon, and those are the only 2 birds you saw, what you're basically saying is that these birds, eagle and the pigeon, were present at this date in this location, and every other bird in the world was not there based on my birding. And so when you look here at the swan, for example, there are areas in which it is predicted to occur. So here, tons of swans right along the border of Minnesota and North Dakota here in May. And all these areas, it's not predicted to occur. And that is based on people going out there and submitting a complete list of birds in their yard and saying, yep, I'm reporting everything. And there were no tundra swans here. And so that data is really valuable. So even if you go out and you go looking for owls for the atlas or something, and you don't find anything, entering that data and saying there was nothing here, but if there was, it would be on this list, is a really, really valuable thing. It's worth pointing out. And so once you look at this kind of species throughout the entire year as well, you can get these incredible kind of futuristic range maps almost that really paint in incredible detail where and when a tundra swan lives its life, basically. So red for breeding, blue in non-breeding, and then green and yellow for both the spring and autumn migrations. And just all, again, from your sighting, you make this possible. Another good example of kind of migration and just seeing the explosion of spring northward is, of course, a familiar bird to this crowd, and just being able to see migration in action. And it's for me at least, a really powerful thing. And these models, these status and trends models, are available for essentially every species in North America. So if you go to eBird and click the Science tab at the top of the top of the page, you can go on in and browse them, download them, do whatever you would like. So it's something that hopefully will be useful to you as well as a birder or whatever way you're interested in. And of course, by having all of these species available, you can do some really interesting comparisons too, the classic East versus West, and looking at bullocks versus Baltimore Orioles. You can start to see some of these contact zones and go there if you want some hybrids. But just an incredible way to see the kind of avoidance of the high Sierras or the high Rockies, and the range of Baltimores in the East as well. One of the things that's been really exciting too is expanding this globally. So everything we've looked at kind of in North America has been really from and for kind of birders like us. But around the world, there's increasingly more and more people kind of birding, engaging in birds, as we talked about before, and contributing what they find. And so this past year, we've kind of started to foray into global modeling of species, which has been really exciting. And so here is black kite, that many folks who may have traveled to the old world may have run into at all these places shown on the map. And getting to start to understand birds in the old world through these models has been really exciting. You'll see there are some areas that have this dark gray. So light gray is like we talked about with the swan, where there's people eBirding there, and they're saying they didn't see any. Dark gray means there isn't enough data to know whether there is or is not. So if you've traveled overseas and happen to have old notebooks lying around or something, you might be able to report. You can help make this possible and scale even further around the world. But now that we've kind of understood some of the things that can be made possible by the data, just dive into a couple of quick kind of ways that these data have actually been used for conservation and management impacts. One has been working in collaboration with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on eagle permitting, essentially, for potential wind farm development. So bald and golden eagles are protected by the act that, I forget the exact name, but essentially the Eagle Act that ensures that they have a level of protection. And when folks are trying to permit for wind farm development, they will need to do mitigation or surveys to understand whether or not eagles are there. But with eBird data, what we've been able to do is work with the Fish and Wildlife Service to help make that permitting process more targeted in a way that uses these eBird status and trends data, like we looked at before, to basically flag areas where there are not eagles and where there are eagles. And that then has allowed the Fish and Wildlife Service to take these data and create kind of a layer that then can be used to kind of inform wind energy development in a most effective way, a way that maximizes renewable energy availability while also ensuring minimal take on eagles in a way that helps streamline the whole process. So birders going out every day, wherever they want to go, reporting that information, then being transferred, having that be kind of modeled, turned into a robust modeled product that is then shared with decision makers and has kind of an on-the-ground impact for conservation. And a similar one that is kind of more species focused and more kind of policy based is around tricolored blackbirds, which some folks may have seen in California if you've been out there. But is this weird bird that looks at its surface very similar to a red-winged blackbird. Can actually be really hard to tell apart. But they're interesting in several ways. One is that they basically only occur from southern Oregon down through very northern Baja California, just this basically California and the ends. And they breed colonially, and they are often nomadic. So basically you will have of fields. They'll breed in fields or marshes, but you might have this big grassy field that could have 2,000 pairs of tricolored blackbirds breeding in it. And then the next year you could go there and there could be 0. And so they're really hard to understand as a population what they're doing. Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? They're not doing well. For a long time, there had been this thought that they're really not doing well and declining steeply. And there had been some work done, but when that work had been submitted to the state of California for listing at the state level, it hadn't been robust enough to be kind of pulled together in this. So folks at the lab worked with other groups in California that had banding data and nest monitoring data, and combined that with some of these eBird data to then create an integrated population model that showed that over the last 10 years or so, tricolored blackbirds have actually declined by 34%. And this information that was, again, made possible by birders in collaboration with these the other groups and other data sources, was then used by the state of California to officially list the tricolored blackbird and afford it protections within California. So it's really exciting to be able to kind of have our everyday passion and hobby or avocation turned into something like this. Again, increasingly around the world, this is also a source of impact. And in India, there's a great group that we work with there called Bird Count India that has worked extensively with governmental groups and other NGOs throughout the country to develop the State of India's Birds, which kind of like for our atlases here is their real first ever full evaluation of the distribution, range, trends in abundance, and conservation status for many birds that regularly occur in India. And it was all done with eBird data. So we're really excited to be able to work with groups like this, support the work that they're doing wherever it might be. And that, I think, brings us really nicely to kind of where we are now. And so as talked about before, the theme is kind of breeding birds and breeding bird atlases. And the place that we are now is this new era of atlasing, as others mentioned before. 20 years ago, kind of the last generation of atlases, many of us were out there taking paper notes, mailing it in, and an unfortunate coordinator or group of coordinators were having to hand enter or transcribe, type all these various data sets. I remember participating in the Massachusetts breeding bird atlas in 2007 with the paper form. But now we have this new era. So there's 8 atlases currently being run through the same kind of eBird framework that the Maryland DC atlas is. And all of them are now kind of joining this new framework that both within a state or a region is collecting data at levels that kind of have exceeded any previous, but also in a pretty standardized fashion, so that hopefully in a few years or in the not too distant future, there'll also be an opportunity to look at atlas data across state boundaries. So Virginia just finished their atlas last year. By the time Maryland DC is done, maybe there'll be the ability to make comparisons there. North Carolina is also starting this year, kind of increasing the contiguity down the coast. And it'll be interesting to see what other states come on in the region and maybe begin to look at things really holistically as we try to better understand our breeding birds. And so these new atlases, one of the things that have been really exciting is just the opportunity to use the technology that we have at our fingertips now and in our pockets every day with smartphones to really collect what can be argued as better and really more precise data. So previously, many atlases, just due to the limitations of the format, you'd collect kind of at the level of the block what the highest evidence level was, and sometimes the date, sometimes not even. It was just over the whole atlas, and that was kind of what was used, and that gave some great results then. But now with technology at our fingertips, we can get so much more, so much richer information. And so through kind of the Atlas framework that's being used in Maryland, DC or elsewhere, if you go out, every time you go out, you have the opportunity to contribute kind of what you found, and what the kind of highest evidence was on that checklist. And that is an incredibly valuable amount of data. So here for Baltimore Oriole, you can see that there's really an incredibly rich set of data in here that can be used both at the kind of broad block level, but also diving in much more specifically. If you want to understand the breeding birds at a given park or a given region, that's also possible. And so invariably, the first year of any of these new format atlases has collected data far beyond any other given atlasing year in the past. Many atlases also have actually collected more data in the first year of the project than the entire last 5-year effort. And I think that comes back to both the growth of birding and the birding community around the world, and just how many people are available and interested, and also the ease of participation and to participate repeatedly and share what you see kind of all the time. And so there's a whole variety of many of ways that these data can be used. They all go into the models that we looked at before. But one of my favorite examples of this is this really cool kind of phenology chart that the Wisconsin Atlas kind of developed as a concept and others have been using. So it's a little bit complex and they're still working on kind of bringing this together, but this is a graphic from the Wisconsin Atlas team that basically is showing here on the y-axis all of the codes. So each breeding code, and then here is time. So basically this is throughout the season, when are given birds exhibiting specific behaviors. So here for black-billed cuckoo, you can see that there's kind of this earlier season. They are carrying nesting material, they are courting, they're singing. The singing goes throughout a very broad stretch of the season, but kind of peaks earlier. And then as you get kind of later in the season here to the right, you can see on nest, nest with eggs, carrying food, feeding young, and fledged young, and begin then to really understand that, okay, if we're reporting our behaviors every time we're seeing them throughout the season, you can understand that, okay, black-billed cuckoos are going to be carrying nesting material kind of in late May through late June. They're going to be feeding young and primarily in the window of kind of maybe July 10th to July 25th or so. And then those fledged young are really going to be out starting in mid-July through kind of early August. So it's both really interesting as kind of a birder to be able to understand this and better learn about what our birds are doing, but also in the context of conservation and management, being able to know when is important for birds, maybe grassland species and bobolink, for example, knowing kind of when they are breeding in a certain region, especially as that changes with changing climate, as many birds are shifting their behavior to varying degrees, being able to understand specific timing and even regionality as maybe a bobolink on Delmarva is going to be breeding at a different time than one in Garrett County. So there's definitely a lot of variability there as well. And so the thing that is so cool and so inspiring, and why I really would love to be there in person and meet you all and kind of help out, is that you make this possible. Everybody on this call, everybody birding in Maryland and DC, and in just the first kind of year and change, you've already gone out and contributed more than 85,000 checklists of what you found, almost 1,200 people. And this is the most mind-blowing statistic to me. I feel very fortunate to be able to work with atlases around the US and around the world. And I have never encountered in any of the atlases that we've done so far, almost 100% block data collection at some level in basically the first year. So hats off for that. It's really incredible. And also just tremendous to see the amount of information coming in and what to do there. And so one of the things that's really fun is the ability to map that and kind of see that in real time, where you've been, what you've done, and of course, what's still left to do. So super exciting start, but also really exciting to think about, okay, there's basically 4 more years and what's to do now, where to go, what new discoveries and adventures kind of await in the context of breeding birds. So here, looking at kind of the daytime hours, so the diurnal effort hours, you can see that you pretty much nailed most everything between Washington and Baltimore. But maybe there's a lot of opportunity out here on Delmarva, or especially if you're heading out west, and seeing kind of what's out there. So a lot of opportunities, and these effort maps, you can find this in the Explore section of the Atlas portal. If you're not familiar with it, it's just a really nice way to be able to understand kind of at scale what's going on, and then you can also zoom in and click on any given point and be able to jump into that. Then, of course, there's the nighttime hours. So for anyone who's really a big owl fan, or enjoys looking for woodcock or rails at night or anything like that, there's a lot of coverage that's needed for that, and something that can be a really fun way to bird a little bit differently, especially in the next few weeks. There's a lot of nightjar activity, and owls are starting to fledge. Can be a really great time to run into kind of fledgling owls, great horns calling, or bards, or many other species. And then kind of the last lens, these are all into the effort map, by the way. You can just kind of change here what you're looking at. Here, the confirmed species, and again, seeing that there's a lot of effort around here, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. I mean, you can go not too far from any of the main urban areas, or anywhere in the state, to find areas that are pale blue that only have less than 10 species confirmed in them. So that can be a really fun way to go out, find a few birds, and then you go back and look at this the next day, and you can see the squares actually changed color, and that's all thanks to you. So it's a really cool thing to be a part of. I really hope I will almost certainly try and get down there in the next few years to do a block a little bit. Gabriel won't let me hear about it otherwise, so I gotta give it a whirl a little bit, but wish I could be there right now. And it's just so cool. I was kind of poking through the data while looking at this, just pulled out a few kind of names and folks that were in the recent checklists and recent sightings, and just really cool to see all the different people that are engaging from all the different. I love seeing the little bios and little backgrounds, and just an amazing thing to kind of be a part of the birding community and see all the different people that are engaging with birds, both through this project and through all sorts of other things. So it's a lot of fun, and really look forward to poking around there and seeing what more can be found. Just going to give a sneak peek at a couple quick upcoming birding tools that are looking at kind of across the eBird and Merlin realm, and then intentionally kind of kept this with a bunch of time for questions. So if you have specific questions about the Atlas or anything else, I'm sure if you have them, someone else does as well. So look forward to having those. One upcoming birding tool that really excited to talk about, that's actually coming out in the next few weeks, is Merlin Sound ID. So many of you may have used the Merlin Bird ID app. It's a free app from the Cornell lab that has kind of free photos and sounds and descriptions of all the birds, and is kind of integrated with eBird. So you can bounce back from reporting your settings in eBird to getting ID tips and help in Merlin. And the newest feature coming to Merlin, it's already had a photo ID feature where you can take a picture of a bird with Merlin and it will suggest identifications based on the image, is now being expanded to sound ID as well. So some folks call it Shazam for birds, where basically you can hold up your phone and just kind of start recording, and it will listen to what's calling out there, and then give you some potential suggestions for identification that you can then listen to the sounds of and be like, yep, this is my bird, and really have a chance to kind of learn in the field in real time. And this is built from recordings that you and others have contributed on your eBird checklist to the Macaulay Library. So it's made possible by that. And then also there's eBird data in the background that is helping suggest species based on where you are. So this is a tool that you power and you make possible, and something that we're really excited about being able to roll out, kind of give back to the birding community in whatever way is helpful. And then one other piece that's kind of more eBird focused that we're looking at hopefully in the next year or so is kind of developing an eBird reports, eBird trip reports kind of tool that still working on the name of, but basically a way to summarize a bunch of checklists in whatever way you want. if you went on a trip to Costa Rica, if you just went out and did a Christmas bird count, if you just went down the road for a weekend and wanted to put all your checklist at a single link you could share with someone, this will support all of that. So a little bit of a sneak peek, again, in progress, something we're working on, but just wanted to share it with you all, and thanks for coming out, for all your efforts. So want to also just thank all the folks that make eBird writ large possible, and just the support that allows us to provide this platform for free is tremendously appreciated. And thanks to all of you for everything you do for birds and birding, and for atlasing. So I'm just going to leave this map up here in the hopes that it will spur some folks to want to go out and see what they can find soon, go into some of those paler blocks and kind of get them bluer, but we'll see how we can do. Great. So I will just pivot to the Q&A if that sounds good. John and Meg, go from there.
Sounds good. Yes, let's go to the Q&A.
Great. Yeah, so there were two questions early on about the lines on that map in the oceans, and they were about those observations made from ships. And I'll just jump back to that really quick. Yeah, so on this map here, yes, these lines are all made from ships. So this is one of my favorites, where land ends right here, but this is a common cruise ship route to the Antarctic Peninsula. So you go up here to the Falklands, go over to South Georgia, down to the Antarctic Peninsula and back. You can also see that from Tasmania to this island, which I can't recall the name of, it takes approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. You can see the day and night bands there. So there's all sorts of information you can kind of get out of this. But yeah, again, just a testament to birds and birders, and the fact that they and we are everywhere in some cool ways. Another question from Scott: what's the functional difference between Merlin Sound ID and BirdNet? Merlin Sound ID is they're both working to help identify birds by sound. Merlin Sound ID is available or will be available for both iOS and Android, and it's really tightly integrated with eBird and Merlin and kind of the Cornell lab. So right now it's focused on North American species, so it'll have about 400 or so species when it goes live, and should be something that will hopefully be of value to you later this summer and into years in the future. There's a couple more questions coming in. Here's one from Carrie McPartland. Will I be able to directly add Merlin sound bites to my eBird list? That's a great question. From the very first version, the goal is just to kind of give Sound ID help in the kind of Merlin process. So if you're recording something, just be able to kind of give you that suggestion. In future versions, we're absolutely working to then allow you to say, yep, this is my bird. Would you like to add that to your eBird list, and add the little sound file that could then be added. You can go listen to it later. Others can learn from it as well. So not right from the start, but definitely something in the future. A question from Ed Jezzi. As you know, I love eBird. I do know that, Ed. It's great to have you here. Any thoughts on what new functions are coming to help atlasers in the Atlas portals? That's a great question. We did some work in collaboration with Gabriel and the other Atlas coordinators this spring to help facilitate kind of the data quality side of the Atlas. So helping make it so that Atlas coordinators can more easily work through the data that are coming in and make sure that what's on maps and block summaries is as accurate as possible. And then one of the things that's going to be rolling out in the coming months too is when you're out using the eBird mobile app in the field, there'll be the ability to basically have the app detect when you're nearing the edge of a block. So if you're driving along and you forgot to turn your phone off, or forgot to stop your checklist, or if you just weren't aware, the phone can then say, hey, you're nearing the edge of an Atlas block. Would you like to stop your checklist, or whatever you want to do from there. So that's one that we're really excited about, because hopefully it'll make it a lot easier to think about all that. There's a question from Kevin. Yeah, great. Yeah, so Kevin, thanks for mentioning the Thayer birding software and talking about the importance of that. Yeah, it's definitely been an incredibly valuable tool, and really, I mean, I think inspirational to a lot of resources and similar pieces like that. And yeah, hats off to Pete there. I remember using that when getting into birding as well. Really great thing. Question from Brent: thoughts on adding safe date info into eBird portals? So the safe date information, there's definitely a wide variety of kind of approaches to safe dates and what the goals are there by different atlas portal. So some atlases don't use safe dates at all, and that seems to be kind of a direction that many atlases are heading. Basically, with the amount of data that's coming in now, collect the maximum amount of reports of just behavior. So basically have people go out and say, if you had a bird singing, then just report that it's singing. And then after the fact, being able to look at all of the data on singing birds and understand kind of when to put those barriers there, or those hard stops. So it's something that, because there is that variety, it's largely been on the side of the individual project to kind of put those guidelines and that information out there, rather than building it directly into the portals. So that's kind of the reason for that approach right now. And a question from Scott: why am I not able to add sexes and ages in the eBird app? So part of that has been that one of the fundamental simple reasons is that our biggest challenge, I would say, kind of at eBird writ large, and I think across many applications of it, is always bandwidth. So at the lab, there's about 5 of us now that work on the project management side of things, and then a technical team of maybe 15 to 20 or so that are working across everything from the analysis, the research, the database administration, mobile development, user interface design, software development. And with a team that, although on one hand does have a few folks on it, still pretty small. And it's just, our biggest challenge is always prioritizing and figuring out how to do that. In the context of ages and sexes, our experience has been that those data haven't been widely used by researchers or conservationists to date. Part of that is certainly a chicken and egg thing, where they're not available in the app, so they're not collected to the same degree. But because of that, we have focused on things like breeding evidence and counts and pieces that we know are having an impact for collaborators and partners around the world, and have built those in. So at some point in the future, we may pull age and sex in as well. But right now, it's just been, there's always a 1,000 things that could be done, and that one hasn't kind of risen to the higher priority level, if that makes sense.
Ian, there's a question in the chat box.
Okay, great. From Brenda: will there be a future capability to geolocate the bird exactly at location you see it and save that data? Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's one that folks ask sometimes. And I would say, kind of simply, right now there's no plan to add that. And one of the biggest reasons for that has been that I think every time we've kind of really gone several steps down the process of thinking through how to add that, the conversations we've had with both birding communities as well as researchers and kind of data users has been that there have been some challenges in that. I think one is on the data collection side. So if you go out and you spend a morning birding and you see maybe 1,000 individual birds, how would that be collected? Would you be wanting to geolocate 1,000 different individuals? And if so, what if the bird moves? Do you do it twice? Do you do the midpoint of where it was? There's some practicalities of that have felt really challenging once we've kind of dived into them. And then the second one has been that on the data analysis side, in many cases, and of course not all, but in many cases, the unit of kind of analysis that you can really look at for a bird is not just an exact location. So many birds, I mean, you detect them in a location, but they might have moved on in just a minute or two to, even if it's just a few trees over or 100 meters away, it's still kind of this shifting thing. So the unit of the checklist has been a really powerful way to kind of collect data at a scale that is both achievable and approachable for birders. You go out, you list what you see, but you don't have to drop a pin for every single bird. And also at a level that has worked well for research. But it does speak to the value of keeping your list short, both in time and distance. So if you do a 5-mile list, it's going to be a lot less precise in the data that's available, as opposed to if you do a 0.1-mile list and do more like that. So the shorter your lists in duration and distance, the more valuable it will always be. But the ability to collect the data at a checklist level so that you have that complete checklist question, like we talked about earlier with the, are you reporting everything or not? That question has really been what has underpinned so much of the value of eBird data to birds and birders at large. But great question. A question from Carrie: is everybody that works at eBird also birders? Essentially, yes, pretty much everybody. I think one of the things that's been just really exciting about being kind of on the team and working at the lab here is that everybody that works there is just totally stoked about what we're working on, and we go out and we use it every day. So the kind of running joke is, oh, if we're doing an eBird checklist, are we getting paid right now? Sadly, that's not true, but it's still fun. So we're working on that. Maybe we'll get that through someday, but yeah, we're pretty much all birders, and it's a good time. Will Merlin Sound ID be able to identify the calls of any young birds? From Janet. Great question. I would love for you to download it and try it when it comes out in a couple of weeks, and then go find a young bird and let us know how it worked. It is something that exists based on, so it's basically a machine learning model. So what that means basically is you take, say, for red-eyed vireo, 100 recordings of red-eyed vireo song, and then you go through and you draw a box around every single song in those recordings, and then you give all of those annotated recordings with the boxes around the specific song to a model, and the model then looks at all of those, and then it learns what red-eyed vireo looks like. And then you do that for every species, and then you give it a sound, and it compares it to all of those species that it has learned, and it says this is the one that it matches. And so a large part of that depends on what it has been trained on, what those recordings are. So if people have recorded those young birds and put those in their eBird checklist and in the Macaulay library, then it will likely do pretty well with those. If it's something that isn't heard very often or doesn't have a lot of recordings, it might struggle with it a little bit more. So it's really variable, but I would turn that right back around, and I hope you get a chance to test it out. Question from Brent: is there a way to record a general ID, e.g. flycatcher or sparrow, in the mobile app? There absolutely is. So if you look for flycatcher or gull or shorebird or hawk or anything like that, there will be like a shorebird SPA, SP dot, or flycatcher SPA or warbler SPA in there for you to include in your checklist if you want. So if you're ever not sure, always just use the SPA. Being conservative for identification is pretty much always the best way to go. And those SPAs are there to allow you to do that. Great question. Question from Marcia. How about a pause button on the tracking, or the ability to better edit the track? Yeah, so the pause button has been intentionally not put in there because we really do want the tracks to be contiguous, kind of a single birding effort. But the better editing for the track, right now there's the editing in the mobile app before you submit. But one of the things we are going to be working to add in kind of the next year or so is the ability to edit a track after you've submitted the checklist. So being able to do that on the website and be able to kind of trim that back to your true distance if you forgot to turn it off before you drove home and then entered the list, which I've done myself, and many others have as well. Great. Any more questions from anybody? Here's a question from Bill. Many eBird users like myself are not very skilled at birding by ear, so we do not list many of the birds we only hear. What assumptions do researchers make about this, since it doesn't always mean other birds were not there? Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think it comes back to that, what that question is asking, the complete checklist question, are you reporting all birds, is not could you identify all birds or not, but are you reporting everything you were able to identify? So what these models do is they look at all of the information from a region, all of the contributions, and they work to standardize that by the amount of time spent in the field, the distance traveled. Those are two of the most valuable predictors, and then using the species on the list to do it that. As a part of that, the model also looks at variation between checklists and kind of what's reported and helps standardize for that. So the main takeaway is that as long as you do to the best of your ability what you can to report what you find, that's what counts, and the data is incredibly valuable. So whatever you go out, as long as you just report everything, you're not leaving off the pigeons, you're not leaving off the starlings, then that does make those data valuable, and it's able to be corrected for. Question from Tom: are the SPA recordings used? Yeah, I mean, using eBird data is always a really interesting thing. So a lot of what we talked about and looked at today are some of these kind of animations and these research applications that might be having a more rigorous look at kind of the information, only looking at so many of these only look at short duration lists, short distance lists that are complete, that can be used for these kind of analyses. But eBird is used in so many ways by so many different people. So the SPAs, for example, as a birder, a lot of the times when you're browsing, you might be interested to see, oh, interesting, they had a bunch of, there were 300 shorebird SPA at this place, and they were too far away to identify on this day, but maybe I'll go and check it out to see if they're on a closer mudflat or something. So they're definitely used writ large. They aren't used as much for the information like we're looking at here. But all data have value. We very firmly believe that every single sighting has value. A house sparrow at a gas station that's just an incidental sighting has value. It doesn't necessarily have as much value as something that is a stationary count for 10 minutes in the middle of the forest up in the mountains where no one has submitted an atlas checklist yet, but it all has value. So it's this sliding scale, and it always has something there. Question from Liz: can't remember what period of time this global map of checklists represents, just 2021 or something else. It's exciting. This is all eBird data until, I believe this is the start of 2021. So this is, about 1 billion observations from about 690,000 or no, I think it's over 700,000 folks now. So yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's fun just looking at this and kind of seeing where things work. And one of the things too that's worth pointing out is you can see many areas that are really bright, like the Iberian Peninsula, India, Taiwan, and a lot of that is really based on partnerships, because we really do see kind of the role of eBird as a platform for others' success, and the areas in which there's kind of the brightest information. Israel, Turkey are areas in which we collaborate with local groups to have a dedicated portal. Like in Maryland, that is Maryland, DC, they're so white hot, you can hardly even tell. Question from Michael: when counting red-winged blackbirds in a marsh, you see or hear 175, but no, there are more. Should you put 175 or X? Almost invariably, it is more valuable to include an estimate. So X really could be 1 or 1 million. and there's kind of no granularity within that. If you see or hear 175, but if you know there are more, maybe put 200 or something like that. Basically, it's always better to do your best to make a realistic estimate of what you think was present. And don't worry too much about whether it's 200 or 210 or 215. Generally, the kind of level of counting that is important for the kinds of research outputs we looked at today is it 100, 250, 500, 1,000? Those are often the kind of levels that are of interest, these almost order of magnitude differences. As birders, at least personally, I know I can often get very hung up on, oh, were there 170 or 180 of this thing? That might just be me. But in the kind of reality of how the data are used, it's always more valuable to make an estimate, a realistic estimate to the best of your ability than just use an X. Great question. Question from Carrie. Are there other ideas? You mentioned the India Atlas to increase global adoption of eBird. Yeah, so we work, again, on the kind of portal context with a bunch of groups around the world. So there's, I believe, almost 50 or over 50 now eBird portals, like we have kind of in Maryland, DC, that are regionalized versions of eBird that work to support groups in that region. So it's across, I think, 35 countries or so for that. There is data from every country, as you can see here. eBird Mobile is available in 32 languages. The eBird website's available in 12. We support bird names in more than 60 languages now, and work with groups all around the world to continually improve and increase that. So we're definitely very focused. eBird is a global platform, and we're very focused in making it be something that exists for anybody around the world that is interested in birds, birding, education, conservation, research. We're there for it. So it's definitely a really, really fun thing to see, just again, the power of birds and birders around the world, and be fun to see how it continues to grow into future years, hopefully.
Okay, if there are no more questions, there's another question. Yes, I will answer this one, Ian. This presentation has been recorded, and it will be made available to the public. Exactly how, I am not sure, but it will definitely be made available. Just one brief comment about the map that you have shown up there. There are other applications of eBird beyond strictly birds, and one of our talks tomorrow in the seminar is by Sonia Kolstoy, who uses eBird to figure out where people are going to go birding, and using that to assign economic value to those areas. And that is another way that eBird eBird data is being used.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of exciting information around that, and I think it's important to note that so working with Sonia, and there's one or two other groups that we work with that we kind of work closely on and collaboratively have looked at these questions together with. And it's not that your data is being used kind of by everybody to look at where and when birders go. So definitely just want to be clear about that there have been a couple specific research endeavors to try and understand some of these effects, to be able to kind of accurately reflect birders, especially in the context of in kind of environmental economics and how that works together. So yeah, that's definitely an exciting other element of how this all works, for sure.
And her talk is available right now. Just go through the Whova agenda, and you can go watch it tonight. One more question, two more questions.
Great. Yeah, Wendy says, I see that much of Africa has no data. Is that bandwidth or partnership? Yeah, Africa is definitely one of the regions that has kind of a lot of room for opportunity. I think it's kind of a combination of both bandwidth or partnership. Like you say, Kenya has an active birding community. Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, So Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and South Africa have pretty active birding communities. Outside of that, there isn't as much of a culture of birding as we're kind of used to in Eastern US at least. So that's kind of been one of the challenges there, just in terms of finding groups to engage with. But we do collaborate with folks there, and we're really excited to support the work that they do. And then a question from Catherine. Is there an opportunity to overlay this bird setting information with flora information if this is mapped elsewhere? Absolutely, yeah. So eBird data are used in a lot of, so I believe it's over 300 or 350 peer-reviewed papers now that have used eBird data. And some of those are bird specific, but there are also a bunch that are comparing across different taxonomic groups, looking at global biodiversity, and all the data in eBird and everything we looked at today is freely available and open source. So if you want to, you could go download 1 billion bird observations. You might want to be careful with your computer, make sure it can handle that. But all the data is available to look at that in context with flora or anything else. All of eBird data also go to GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is kind of a clearinghouse for biodiversity data that is used by governments and groups around the world for decision making in the context of biodiversity.
Okay, I think, Ian, it's time to say thanks for the wonderful talk. I very much enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, hang on a sec here. The keynote speech is named after the father of atlasing, Chan Robbins, and as a small token of our appreciation to you, we'd like to present you with this award. Since you're not actually in Maryland, I can't give you the actual framed award, but we will be sending it to you next week. Thanks again for the talk, and thanks to all the MOS members who tuned in. And if there are no more questions, I think it's time to say goodnight.
Well, thank you so much for for the opportunity to be here. I'm honored with this award. It's really incredible to be able to talk to everybody here. And thanks again. Look forward to seeing you in the field sometime.
I hope so. Good night.